Hey everybody, it's fucking that guy, Remnant Fracture. Wow, I can't believe I've already started over my voice. So I'm here doing something a little different than normal. I'm gonna be doing a deck profile that I just actually completed this Sunday at regionals. Um, I mean it's up for update, so I might update it, in the future or something. But I'm gonna basically go give a rundown of my deck. Explain why I'm running certain things that I am. Some things are obvious, of course, but yeah, that's pretty much what today's video is going to be. So I'm going to start with the monsters, and then head down to spells and traps, because believe it or not, this deck runs more spells and traps than monsters. So let's start off with the obvious. 3 Ash Blossoms. I don't really think I need to, justify myself on that one. Ash Blossom's great for disrupting plays on your opponent's turns, or if you can't even set up very well. And then that leads into the second pair of hand traps. Ghost Ogre. Get rid of those pesky continuous effects on your opponent's side of the field. It's going to work out great. Now here's where you're going to figure out the archetype that I'm running. Your most important monster card in this deck. Witchcrafter Madame Vare. It is very useful. It has 2 effects. The first one, you can discard a spell and negate face-up monsters on your opponent's side of the field's monster effects. And that's a quick effect, so you can use it during their turn or yours. Keep in mind, though, it's a once-per-turn effect, and if your opponent summons another monster after you've used this effect, that monster gets its effects. Its second effect is when a spellcaster monster battles, you can reveal a number of spell or trap cards. No, just spells. Sorry, just spells in your hand, and it gains 1,000 attack and defense for each spell you revealed. Now, unfortunately, you can only use one of those effects per turn. Like if you use the attack increase, it's you can't use the monster negation, but still very handy, especially because they're quick effects. You can choose. Next up, we have 3 Witchcrafter Pitores. A lot of the Witchcrafter low-level monsters have the same basic effect. You can quick effect tribute them and discard a spell to special summon a Witchcrafter from your deck in any position you want. Now, their effects in the graveyard differ depending on the monster. This one specifically, when it's in your graveyard, you can banish it from your graveyard, draw 1 card, and then you have to discard 1 Witchcrafter card or banish your entire hand. So, pretty useful for getting a leg up, just like a +1 card, just for having that in your graveyard, especially after you've used its quick effect to special summon something. So, it's very handy. Now, the next low level we got is 3 Witchcrafter Potteries. Now, like the other one, you tribute it, discard a spell, and special summon any Witchcrafter monster from your deck in any position you want. Now, Pottery's effect is a little different than Pitores. When it's in the graveyard, you can banish it from your graveyard and add 1 Witchcrafter card from your graveyard to your hand. So, pretty helpful if you need to use a card that you've already, discarded, like a spell card that you've already discarded, but you want to activate its effect that turn. Or just you need a monster to protect yourself. Either way, it's, pretty good. Next up, we got 3 Witchcrafter Shmedas. I've never really understood how to pronounce it very well. That's your level 4. Same basic effect, tribute, discard a spell, and, your frickin' special summon from your deck. Now, this one, when you banish from the graveyard, or you can banish from your graveyard, to look through your deck and send to the graveyard 1 Witchcrafter card. Now, that's very helpful for Witchcrafter-specific spells, because a lot of the times the Witchcrafter-specific spells will allow you to add to your hand at the end of the turn if it's in your graveyard, as long as you control a face-up Witchcrafter monster. So that's pretty handy. Now, me personally, this is where you can differ, but these higher-level monsters I run less of than the lower levels. Now, Witchcrafter Madame Vare, I would run 2 if you have it, but it's a little pricey at about $13, so that's honestly a personal preference. Me personally, I'm getting a second one in sometime soon, so I plan on running that and maybe taking out 1 or 2 spells and traps for something. Now, next up, we got a really handy quick effect destruction with 2 Witchcrafter Hanes. Now, this card's pretty versatile in this deck, specifically because they're level 7s, so you can always bring out or overlay to bring out an Absolute Dragon. Then when Absolute Dragon's destroyed, your Vortex Dragon. So, pretty handy for that. Its effect is quick effect. Once per turn, you can discard 1 spell and target 1 face-up card your opponent controls and destroy it. So, pretty handy, especially if they summon a monster you don't want to deal with, like frickin' Borreload Dragon. You could just get rid of it as soon as it's summoned. And since you can use that once per turn, you can use it during your turn to open your opponent's field and get ready for attack. So next, that's it for the monsters. Next, we're going to run down on the traps and spells. We're going to be going over the Witchcrafter specific spells and traps first, then we'll move on to, your core. So I run, personally, 1 Collaboration. Collaboration's effect is once per turn, or you can activate it, each of its effects once per turn. Only one of them once per turn. So Collaboration, you get to target 1 face-up Witchcrafter monster on your field. It can attack twice during each battle phase. And your opponent cannot activate spells and traps until the end of the damage step this turn when that Witchcrafter monster attacks. If it's in the graveyard at the end of your turn and you have a face-up Witchcrafter monster on the field, it can add itself from the graveyard back to the hand. However, if you activate its first effect, you can't activate the add to hand effect, which most of the Witchcrafter spells have that same common theme. So I also personally run 1 Witchcrafter Draping, which you can target opponents' spells and traps up to the number of Witchcrafter monsters you control, and those cards get added back to their hand. So pretty good if you just think you're going to win the game and just, wipe their traps and spells just to make sure and attack them directly. The reason I only run one of these specific spells is because a lot of the cards in this deck, you're going to be able to send Witchcrafter monsters straight from your deck to your graveyard, so you can just force its effect, since you haven't activated that turn, to, just add it back to your hand. So next, 2 Witchcrafter Holidays. I run 2 because it's a very handy card. I would not mind having multiple. Same secondary effect as the rest. During end phase, you can add to hand if you have a Witchcrafter monster. Its first effect is, though, you can target 1 Witchcrafter monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So that's why I run 2. It's pretty handy. I like to draw it, then use the secondary effect to keep recycling it for discard fodder for the Witchcrafter monsters. So next up, we have 2 Witchcrafter Scrolls. You can use one of their effects once per turn. Its first effect is, when it's activated out on your field. When your Witchcrafter monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can draw 1 card. So, good draw power, pretty versatile because of its other effects. Its other effects is, if a Witchcrafter monster's effect would make you discard a card, you can send this from your face-up spell and trap card zone to the graveyard instead. Now, you can use that with your draw effect that turn, but if you use either of those effects, the secondary effect, which if it's in the graveyard, it gets placed back on your field at the end phase instead of in your hand if you control a face-up Witchcrafter monster. But again, pretty versatile, especially that's why I run 2 of them, because you can have 1 out on the field and 1 to place itself for discard fodder and such. So that leads to the second continuous spell, which is very handy, Witchcrafter Bystreet. Once per turn, each of your Witchcrafter monsters are saved from destruction, which actually saved my ass in the regionals, because somebody used Raigeki, and it just did nothing to my Witchcrafter monsters, because each one of them is saved once per turn. Now, of course, the downside is if they activated Dark Hole right after that, all of them would be destroyed still, but still, very good. It's a very good way to avoid destruction. It has the same secondary effect as Scroll, where you can discard this from your face-up spell and trap card zone, and instead of discarding from your hand. So it's good, for Madame Vare, so that you don't have to discard, so you can reveal. And again, like Scroll, during the end phase, if you've activated either of those first 2 effects, you can't place it back on your field until basically the next turn that you haven't activated it. So it's a pretty versatile card. I like it a lot. I love the destruction prevention, so pretty good. Next, we have the only Witchcrafter-based trap that you run. Me personally, I run 2 Masterpiece, and Masterpiece's effect is once per, or you can activate it, target 1 Witchcrafter spell in your graveyard, add another copy of that spell from your deck to your hand. Pretty handy for like extra, Madame Vare fodder. Like if you have Madame Vare out on the field, and you like send this to the graveyard, and you're running multiple. If you send By Street to the graveyard to negate monster effects, you can activate Masterpiece, target By Street, and add another one from your hand, like from your deck to your hand. So pretty helpful. And its secondary effect is, except for the turn you activated its first effect, you can banish it from your graveyard along with any number of spells from your graveyard, and special summon a Witchcrafter monster from your deck with level equal to the amount of spell cards you banished. So pretty handy. I didn't really play it that much in the regionals because I never really got it in my hand very much, but pretty handy even so. Next, we're getting on to a personal favorite of mine, because modern decks love to use spells, and this is a great way to stop that. 3 Secret Village of the Spellcasters. Now, what this field spell does is, if you control a face-up spellcaster monster, which all of the Witchcrafters are, your opponent cannot activate spells. If you control no spellcaster monsters, you cannot activate spells. So, the best way they can get around it is if they summon a spellcaster monster like Endymion, unfortunately, even though that deck is pretty try-hard. But it's a good way around a lot of the deck spell cards, especially because you can screw up Endymions by not letting them place their pendulums until they've normal summoned. So it's still handy for a little bit. Like, it's really good against a lot of other decks. So I personally run 3. This is definitely a great turn 1 card, because if you just you summon a spellcaster, you've shut down their spells. So it's a really great turn 1 card. It's helped me out a lot, especially during the regionals. So I would run 3 if I were you. And you can maybe run a Terraforming or 2. I personally don't, because of other cards I have, and it could help, but I found I prefer running a different balance of cards. So next up I run 1 Spellbook of Knowledge, simply because a lot of people need to get their hands on Spellbook of Knowledge, so it's a little hard to get your hands on, but really handy. You can send a spellcaster you control, or another spellbook card from your hand, or face up on the field, except for Knowledge, send it to the grave and draw 2. So it's a good +1, especially because some of the Witchcrafter monsters don't mind if they're in the grave, especially because we got Holiday, which, just special summoned, so it's a decent draw power card. I like it. Next up, we have another staple. 3 Called by the Graves. For obvious reasons. Get rid of those pesky cards that your opponents have in the graveyard. It's especially handy, like if they hit you with an Ash Blossom another turn, then they try, to use a second Ash Blossom, you can Call by the Grave the first and negate the effects till the end of the turn. So, pretty handy. Especially if they're trying to bring back a monster from the graveyard, you can just banish it right before they can summon it. So pretty versatile, staple in most decks. Everybody runs it. Now here's a card that people have actually questioned me on why I run it, but I'll get to that. 1 Foolish Burial. Card's currently on the limited list, so that's why I only run 1. And Foolish Burial, if you don't know, which I highly doubt you don't know, you just send a monster from your deck to the graveyard. Especially since oh shit, oh god, especially because the lower level ones can banish themselves from the graveyard. Like if you send Pitore to the graveyard, you can just banish it to draw a card. Especially if you already have a Witchcrafter card in your hand, you can just discard it. So that's why I run a Foolish Burial. Or if I need something in my graveyard bad, I can summon Shmeda, banish her, and then send a Witchcrafter card from the deck to the graveyard. So pretty handy, just for good quick plays and combos. And then next up, we have a staple of this deck, but not a staple in a lot of other decks. 3 Foolish Burial Goods. Now, that's like Foolish Burial, but it sends a spell or trap to the graveyard. Actually, it might just be spell. Nope, spell and trap from your deck to the graveyard. Since a lot of the Witchcrafter cards, can bring themselves back from the graveyard as long as you control a Witchcrafter monster. Having 3 of these is really good because you can choose which Witchcrafter spells you want back in your hand at the end of the turn. So I run 3 because, it's unlimited right now. Pretty handy. And it's a great turn 1 card to get the spells you need and set up quickly before your opponent even gets a chance to play. Next up, we have kind of an obvious card. Monster Reborn. Everybody knows what it does. Brings back a monster. I run it not necessarily for the Witchcrafter monsters themselves because I got Holiday, but I run it in case, my opponent summons a Borreload and I destroy it. I can just bring back their Borreload without actually having to send, 4 monsters to the graveyard. So, like that, that's great. And, kind of obvious. So, next, another kind of obvious card, Raigeki. Just wipe all of your opponent's monsters off the field and then attack directly, especially since Buy Street can protect you from destruction. And if you have Secret Village and they don't have a Spellcaster monster, great, just get rid of it. And, actually, I just found this card that I forgot to mention in my monsters. I only run 1 Edel. You discard a spell. You can special summon a Witchcrafter from your hand or graveyard, but I think, let's see. And then, if you tribute it and discard a spell, you can bring back from graveyard. So, sorry, I forgot to mention that. It just kind of fell off the pile. So, next up, we're getting into the only 2 traps I run in the deck other than the Masterpiece. Solemn Strike and Solemn Warning. Just straight up negate your opponent's summons, and then it's basically dead cards in the graveyard. Just very handy. They can be used in a lot of situations. A lot of people love running them because it just negates the summon, so... pretty obvious. Obvious is obvious. Next up, we have my extra deck. You don't really need to run an extra deck in this deck, which is actually quite nice, but never hurts. So I'm just starting up with the obvious Borreload Dragon. Every deck runs it. It's really good, especially for getting rid of, pesky monsters. Nightmare Phoenix, just to get rid of, a couple of the spells and traps and otherwise. And keep in mind, I don't know necessarily too much about these cards or the best ways to use them, but especially because I just found a Nightmare Phoenix recently, so I haven't had a chance to play it much. Next up is the obvious, Decode Talker, just generic Link 3 that everybody uses. I also use the Zephyr Metaltron. I've never really been able to use it because I don't get a whole lot of monsters from the extra deck out in these kinds of decks, but it's good just in case. Especially if you steal some of your opponent's monsters. Topologic Bomber Dragon for, getting rid of your opponent's monsters quick. Unfortunately, it gets rid of yours, but it's kind of like a last-ditch effort. This one, I don't really know too much about, but I'm going to try it out and see. Boral Guard. I don't have Boral Sword or anything, so that's why I don't run that instead. I plan on trying to use Boral Guard more in the future. Then we have another Decode Talker. And a Gaia Lightning, just in case I need, higher attack power and just a generic Link 3 monster. Clara and Rushka, the Ventrilla duo, just in case somebody uses a Storming on me, and, I gotta get rid of those monsters because they're locked face down. Then we have the combo I showed earlier, your Absolute Dragon and your Vortex Dragon, to combo with your Hane. Absolute, will bring back will let you summon Vortex from your extra deck if it gets destroyed by battle or card effect. And Vortex Dragon can just, send face-up extra deck to negate something, and when it's brought out, it can send a face-up attack position monster back to the hand, so it's just a good quick play. And the last in my extra deck is number 41, Mr. Drunk to Peer Man. It just, in case I get 2 Shimedas and I just want to lock my opponent out of card effects. Unfortunately, it locks me out of card effects, I think, too. But it's just a good last resort card in case you need, some time to stall. So, let me make sure this is even legal size. Yeah, nope, this is a legal size side deck. So, here's my side deck. It's just my personal belief, just my personal what I want to run. I got 2 Effect Veilers in case some problem effect monster comes up. I don't run them in the main deck because, running the others are a lot better, honestly. Drowning Mirror Force, if they have a lot of attack position cards, just shuffle them back into the deck if they attack directly. Pretty good. Another Edel, just in case I need more, from the hand. Storming Mirror Force, which will, I believe, return them to the hand if they declare a direct attack. A second Collaboration in case I need more spell fodder. Second Holiday for the same reason. Dwimmered Path to add back spellcaster monsters from my graveyard in case I need them again. 2 more Drapings just in case spells and traps become quite a problem with the opponent. Another Edel for obvious reasons. A 3rd Buy Street because it's got a really good effect, and if they're really destruction heavy, it's good to have multiple. A 3rd Hane, just in case I need to get rid of more cards than I originally anticipated for. And this, I wish I could run more in my side deck, but I just don't have a bunch of them, and I don't have the money to buy them right now. Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. I love using this card to get rid of Borreload because I hate dealing with Borreload. So, if you guys like this video, you know, fucking pee in your pants or something. I don't really care. Let me know if you like this video. I just want to know if this is kind of a video that people are interested in. Trying something a little different than my normal gaming. Just wanted to give it a shot. I'm really proud of this deck. It's like my first deck since Dragoonides that I've felt an unconditional love for, with the exception of my Magician Pendulums, but they got a little too mainstream for me back in the day, or more like a year ago, but yeah, I might update this deck in the future and, you know, come out with another deck profile video, but I personally like it a lot. I like the way I run it. In fact, at Regionals, I actually did really well at Regionals without even having a Madame Vare, which I was very surprised over because it's a very essential card for the deck. But the Witchcrafter deck is still pretty versatile otherwise. I just, instead of Witchcrafter Madame Vare, I ran a 3rd Hane, and I put in Effect Veilers just to deal with monster effects. So, I like the deck a lot. I got this after the Regionals ended. Somebody traded it to me, so I really enjoyed that. But yeah, let me know if you guys liked it. I might do some of my other deck profiles in the future. Granted, they're not as well put together as this because I don't have a whole lot of hand traps because they're kind of expensive. But I might run, like, just for fun decks and just do deck profiles. So I have a lot of decks. I would love to make videos on them. So, yeah, just let me know if you guys enjoyed this kind of video. If you even watch, because I highly doubt anybody's going to freaking watch. But, yeah, it's just something different. I had fun with it. So, I'll see you guys later.